Hey y'all. Mm. Today L is for Luke, the Gospel of Luke. The man himself, we don't know too much of, but he was Greek. He was not a Jew, highly educated. He was a physician, so he was a trained doctor. And he was very methodical, very detail oriented. And that's kind of the way he wrote his book. A lot of his training and attention to detail came out in his book. And why do we know that? Because right up front, he says, this is what I did. And so I'm stating the facts. It's almost like a science project. I did this, and I did this, and here's the results. And so what Luke does, he is not too far after Jesus, but he never met Jesus. He's a good friend to Paul. And he knows that there's these stories kind of flying around, and he wants to document those stories while people are still alive, the people that were with Jesus, that people that saw these miracles. And so he interviews a lot of people. And then he's got Paul, who had this encounter with Jesus post-resurrection. And he also knows that Paul has a lot of stories also from the enemy point of view, because, Paul used to persecute these Christians. And so he'd hear these stories about, this Jesus that was doing this and that. So he had a lot of good information, and he took it and put it into this book. So to talk about his book, I need to talk generally about the four Gospels. So if you know that Jesus was shown as four different faces throughout the Bible. He's a lion, an ox, a son of man, and God. So Jesus is represented by all those. The ox is a servant. So each gospel is written in one of those veins. So in other words, John writes, the eagle. The eagle represents God. John writes as Jesus as God. That's why his gospel is so different than the other three, because Matthew writes from the perspective that God is king. He mentions the King of Heaven, King of Heaven, King of Heaven all over his gospel. And his genealogy goes back to King David, because he wants to prove that Jesus is king. Mark he writes from the servant perspective. And if you read, he doesn't have any ancestry in his book. Why is that? People didn't care if you were a servant, what your ancestry was. They just wanted to make sure you could work and that you were a worker. And in fact, if you look at all the run-on sentences in Mark, it was like Jesus did this, and then he got up and went there, and then he did this, and then he went there, kind of like a servant would be. They would be in the background doing this and that and this and that, going from one thing to the next. And then we have Luke, the humanity point of view. Why do we know that? Because his gospel starts with the priest and ends with the priest. Okay, that's a representative of man and the humanity. So he's the priestly gospel, son of man. He uses son of man in his gospel quite a bit. A little bit about these priests. His gospel opens up with Zechariah. He is a priest in the temple, and he has an encounter with an angel. He does not believe the angel, and so the angel makes him mute. Okay, so you have a priest that cannot come out of the temple and bless his people. So it starts with the priest who cannot bless. And do you know who that man is, that priest? His son is John the Baptist. So then we move to the end of the gospel, and it ends with our high priest Jesus being brought up into heaven by God. And he's throwing blessings out left and right before he disappears. It's almost like he doesn't want to go. And it's a beautiful picture. It's not too much to read. Just read that part of it, the last part. And it's like God saying, come on, come on. And Jesus saying, I bless you, I bless you. And it's almost like, I'm going to get out as many blessings as he can. So what I also love about Luke He was a man of science, right? He was a doctor, and he confirms through this book that our God came in human form. So a man of science talking about Jesus Christ. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So also because he was not a Jew, but he knew the Old Testament. He believed in God. So he studied the Old Testament, but he wrote to converted Gentiles. So these Gentiles used to be pagans, right? So the pagans, they didn't care about, the Old Testament. They didn't know the Old Testament. And he knew that. So he is what I call his gospel, I call OT light, Old Testament light. He quotes the Old Testament a little bit, but he knew his audience didn't know that much about the Old Testament. So it's not quoted as much as the other gospels. So L is for Luke, man of science, man of God, travel companion to Paul, preserver of history. Have a wonderful, wonderful day and blessings to you.